Tēnā tātou katoa, kua parau ki mai, tēnei ata, nau mai haere mai. Te wahanga tuatoi, o te wā. Ai, nōku te hono te mihi atu kia koutou. I mai au i whea, ki te tau tōku māma, ko maua te maunga, ko tauranga te moana, ki te tau tōku pāpa, ko tarana ki te maunga. Engari, ai, e mahi anau mō te iwi o Ngāti Hauti, kei Rangi tika. So, as Nick said in the intro, it's my great privilege to work for Ngāti Hauti, and a very small iwi located in the Rangi tika area, and they are the owners of our iwi-based research centre, our kaupapa Māori focused iwi research centre. We undertake a range of public health, health services, health policy and evaluation research, and we do so from a very specific lens of, if you know about kaupapa Māori, you'll know that it's strengths-based, that questions of importance to Māori are prime in our way that we undertake our work. And we are both users and producers of data. So what we find as users of data is that often that data, or those indicators, or those measures we're reading is deficit focused. It talks about Māori as the problem or a problem. Those data might be incomplete or not particularly useful. For example, there was, we know that when we are talking about tobacco and tobacco rates, one of the indicators is whether there is smoking in the home. But we don't know, for those people that do smoke in the home, if there are mitigating strategies they are putting in place to protect their whānau, to protect their babies. So do they actually, they might be smokers, but are they actually smoking outside the home? So the data that we might gather in official statistics might not tell the whole story. Or that there's data out there that we actually, the Crown doesn't collect at all about us. And so we remain invisible, or our activity remains invisible as Māori, as whānau, as hapu, as iwi. And a classic example of this, which I've come across recently, is we do some work in the rongoa space, understanding the contracting and funding of rongoa. And we wanted to understand what is the economic contribution of rongoa to this country. And we know that the Ministry of Health gives $6 billion worth of contracts out, but our little back of the envelope calculation was if we take into account the manufacture, production, training, education, tourism, marketing aspects of rongoa Māori, it's about a $200 million industry in New Zealand. And that's not collected, that information isn't collected anywhere in any business stats. If you look through them, you won't find anything about rongoa Māori. And actually it links also to the invisibility of a response to Y262. That's probably another issue. So as producers of data, as an iwi-based, iwi-owned research organisation that has come to things with a very different philosophy, as producers of data, the data that we try and produce and collect and analyse is strengths focused. It focuses on the collective. It doesn't think about Māori as an individual divorced from their context, but as Māori within their context of whānau hapu iwi. The data that we produce provides a more complete picture of the experience of Māori in Te Ao Māori and Te Ao Pākehā in our country. And we are able to count things that are not necessarily seen as being relevant to anyone else other than Māori. So the purpose of this workshop is to look at measures of success for iwi Māori and what indicators are required to measure our success and what changes might be required to ensure that we're measuring that success. So by the end of the workshop, we hope that you will know at least one Māori measure or indicator of success, and we are calling that a whānau ora outcome. You'll know the difference between what data is currently collected about us and what we actually might require you to collect about us so that we can measure our success as Māori. And you'll know that just because data is collected about us, it doesn't usually, or may not contribute to our well-being. When I was putting this presentation together, I was in quite a fired up mood at the time. It was on the back of a huirumaki reo. So my original title was The Contribution of Policy to Embedding Despair. And those words were chosen very deliberately. What I'm trying to get out of the workshop, and maybe what the other panellists are trying to get out, is for you as the decision makers, as the policy makers, as the funders, as the people that write the budget bids every year, ostensibly to support Māori, to assist them to reach their full potential, to thrive as Māori. What we need you to think about is how you're helping us to achieve that aim. I chose the word despair deliberately because the communities that we see when we're undertaking research are not communities of privilege. I know that I live and work in a very privileged space. There are those of us who are able to navigate Te Ao Māori and Te Ao Pākehā relatively well. We are able to navigate whatever or have thrived in spite of the systemic and structural racism that we may have encountered in our education system, in our health, when we go to the doctor. We do manage to maintain our vision in spite of any personal racism that we may encounter, or unconscious bias, if you prefer that term. However, there is a part of our population that don't have that autonomy or that self-determination or those skills, or have been given those opportunities to navigate the two systems, the two worlds, in quite the same way. And so if you are some of the most poverty-stricken, some of the most vulnerable, you haven't had access to high-quality education, if you haven't had access to safe or affordable housing, if you don't get the healthcare services that you require when you require them, then you are living in an environment of despair. I mean, you may be living in an environment of despair, and that is your day-to-day life. You know, it's not a once-off thing that you can deal with. This is your environment. And so for those people who live in that realm, who have no choice, who are the most vulnerable and the most powerless in our society, maybe the only way that they can demonstrate their autonomy or make decisions affecting themselves is to make decisions around, well, I might want to smoke, or I might need some alcohol, or I might want to try pee, or I might commit suicide, because I can control those decisions, however poor they may be, and they are coping strategies for when your life is one of despair. How do you get out of it? You might drug yourself out of it. And those are the stats that we hear reported about Māori, that we suicide, that our youth suicide, that we smoke far too much, that we drink far too much, that we're overweight. And that's fine. We need that data to see that we can make progress in the future. But when that data gets picked up by the media and that data cycles around and it's told to Māori that that's who you are and that's all you are, it becomes this horrible cycle, and you don't get out of that environment of despair. And the gaze is never flipped. You are the problem, but the gaze is never flipped to, well, maybe you are not the problem. You are the symptom of something that's a bigger problem, and it might be the system that's the problem, and it might be the structures that are the problem. So we need that gaze. So that's what that data drives. It perpetuates this discourse around deprivation, and we need that to change, because Māori are not the problem. We are not, nor do we want to be a problem. We want to thrive and flourish as Māori, as tangata, and as citizens of this country, and we have that right to. So that's what we want to try and get you to think about. Flipping that gaze, asking, is there data of hope? Is there data of aspiration? I have another, very quickly, story. At an unnamed DHB, a colleague was sitting in their annual planning session, and there were 50 senior managers, board members, heads of department, heads of planning and funding, heads of clinical, heads of public health. And they were sitting down doing the annual planning for the year, which you would expect, you would hope would be an opportunity for innovation, for innovative thinking, for thinking about how we can integrate services better across the DHB. And every department head was asked to define the issues for them. And there was a half-hour litany of deprivation, problem, Māori DNA, Māori do not attend, high rates of pregnancy. It was all problem. And my colleague was sitting there with another Māori board member thinking, this story hasn't changed for 15 years. I was here 15 years ago, I'm here again now, that story hasn't changed. The gaze has not been flipped to think, what is the DHB doing to change this? Why aren't Māori attending clinics? Is it something to do with racism? Anyway, flip the gaze, ask a different question. So, in 2015, a Whānau water outcomes framework was developed. This was signed up to by 6 ministers of the Crown and 6 iwi leaders, and I believe it is the only framework that has ever had that level of buy-in by both Crown and iwi. That framework was built on the back of the task force document, which was built on the back of the Whānau water policy in Korowai. So there is actually a 20-year legacy of evidence in that one piece of paper that's on your tables. And that, of course, is on the back of what we understand in Te Ao Māori as being well-being. So it gives you 7 goals, how we will know that we have achieved well-being, or what we call Whānau water, for iwi Māori. So those high-level goals are there. They're also on your papers. It's broken down into short-term goals, 1 to 4 years, 5 to 10 years, 11 to 25 years. So if you take one goal, just one, Whānau is self-managing and empowered leaders, what might we expect to see in the year 2044, and think those are our rangatahi now, they're going to be the leaders in the future. What might we see if they are exercising rangatiratanga on a daily basis? What might we see if they are the repositories of their knowledge? And what does leadership look like for them? And then, if you are able to engender development, which I think you are, as the decision makers and the funders and the policy makers, the people that are right there writing policy about us, determining the indicators that count and measure us, writing the budget bits that will assist us to thrive as Māori. Ask yourselves, if that is the goal, if Whānau water, Whānau wellbeing is the high level goal, what can I do now in my role that will ensure in 25 years' time those rangatahi now are exercising their rangatiratanga on a daily basis? Is what you're doing now going to help us achieve that? And how is what you're doing now going to help us achieve that? Because that will flip the gaze. If you're thinking thriving, flourishing, resilient, contributing to society Māori, not suicidal and suiciding, overweight, drink too much, smoke too much tobacco. If you think that rather than this, we should get different data and different indicators that will measure us. When we were developing the framework and we were trying to populate the indicators, so my understanding is that the framework will be reviewed, we sat down, the technical advisors sat down on one side with our colleagues from the ministries on the other side, and we asked them to help us populate the table. So we asked them, what indicators, what data do you collect now that can help us to know that in 25 years we'll be flourishing? And they said, well, we can tell you the prison stats. We can tell you how many Māori are in prison. We can tell you how many Māori did not sit NCEA level, whatever. We can tell you how many Māori have suicided this year. That is not flipping the gaze. that is telling us what deprivation data you collect now. It is not telling us how, or showing us, or forging a pathway towards where we want to be. So that data might not exist, but that's not to say that it shouldn't exist. Just because something is easy to count, or is being counted now, doesn't mean that you should and continue to. So, part of the purpose of having those on your table is if you think of any indicators or measures or thoughts really around how you might travel to those high level goals, please, we'd love to collect them, we'd love to hear from you. So that's the purpose of that, and we really encourage you to do that. And that's for the geeks who need the references. But you should all know this. Kia ora.